What's up, guys? It's me, Coach Mills here, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down how you can carry on support. A lot of people think that the support role is a very unimpactful role and there's not much you can do with bad teammates, but I'm here to tell you that you can absolutely deadlift on this role if played correctly, and I've recently climbed it even though it's not my main role to Grandmaster, so I'm going to give you all the tips and tricks that I learned along the way. But check me out streaming right now live and tell me your main so I can give you a matchup breakdown. But let's jump right into it. Now, this is one of the biggest things, and it's actually the most important besides the tip at the end, and it's the fact that you are healing simply too much. Healing is efficient, yes, at keeping your team from dying, but it's not something that you should be doing the vast majority of your time. You got to understand that with two supports on a team, you have more than enough heals for everybody, and especially when you think about the fact that a lot of characters don't need that much resources, like Tracer can heal themselves like Roadhog or Soldier, and there's a plethora of health packs around the map. Healing value is really only useful for two specific situations. One, when a teammate is actually low, like legitimately low to the point where something could kill them if they randomly took damage out of nowhere. And two, when a target is actively fighting the enemy, like literally fighting them to the point where they are trading tons of damage, tons of resources, tons of pressure. And this also applies to people that need to be getting peeled, like if someone is being dove on by an enemy and you're keeping them alive temporarily. Now, while this is definitely impactful and things that you should be doing when you see them, this is not going to be all the time. In fact, the vast majority of the time, healing is not going to be the optimal thing to do. You need to use your abilities and damage in order to have an impact over the fight. You gotta understand that for a lot of the support role, they output a crazy amount of damage that can add to your overall damage that your team is producing to apply a ton more pressure to the enemy, change breakpoints so you're actually getting kills, and then just confirm kills outright. And oftentimes, one of the biggest mistakes I see with supports is they are playing a bit too much like healers, when in reality, while healing is a part of your kit, it's really like maybe a 30-40% job. It is not your primary objective at all times, and doing damage and creating plays with your utility is. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't heal, and there's a lot of situations where you do need to heal, and you need to heal well, because the more efficient that you heal, the more disciplined that you heal. Like if you are consistently pumping your team with heals on Ana, and you're going and quick scoping, you're not wasting all these shots trying to heal a target, the more you can do that job and then get back to your other job, which is trying to find some sort of value with your damage with your abilities. Now, another thing that you need to consider, and this is something that I've seen VOD reviewing a lot of players, is there will be someone in their backline, someone that is under threat, someone that is being constantly harassed by like a Genji or a Tracer, and your initial inclination is to just keep pocketing the person that is under threat, right? They keep getting attacked over and over and over again, and you're just pocketing the person that is being attacked because then they will never die. But you also have to understand that unless a certain amount of pressure comes to the people in your backline, they have no incentive to leave. This is where damage is key, right? Damage forces people off angles. Damage forces a Hanzo from flanking and standing up on your high ground. Damage gets a DPS out of your backline. These are the things that can force them away, especially when they're low cooldown. If they're not taking any damage, if they're under no pressure, it doesn't matter how much you heal, they will not leave. Now, you might be saying, hey, it's my tank's job to damage. Hey, it's my DPS's job to damage. And that could be true in some regard, but maybe the DPS is pushed forward, maybe the DPS is dead, maybe the tank is pushed forward dealing with their tank, or a million other situations. But as a support, you have to understand that you can heal and damage, do both, applying the pressure to the targets while keeping your team alive at the same time. You can basically do it all, and I'm not saying that this is easy. I'm not saying this is easy at all, but it's necessary. On a support, you have to make the hard call, and you have to intermingle healing with damage at all times. It is your job to try to enable your team and help them with heals when it's optimal, but also interweave these damage and ability-based plays. And let's talk about abilities, because supports have some of the strongest abilities in the entire game, and I'm not kidding. We have Speed Boost, Nade, Sleep, Suzu, freaking Discord, Damage Boost, Res. I mean, the list just goes on and on. They're crazy powerful. every single one of these abilities you need to try to be using optimally. There's ways to use them defensively, and oftentimes you only want to hold them to be used defensively if you're going to be heavily pressured if you waste it aggressively. So like as an example, if you're an Ana and you're just up against like a poke composition or something slow, something that can't pressure you out of nowhere, trying to go for aggressive nades is pretty risk-free for the most part. But if you're up against a composition that is like going to jump on you, pressure you, dive you, and can kill you outright, especially if you don't have that nade, then you probably want to be a bit more conservative, and you also want to gamble a bit less. So you want to make sure that if you do throw it out aggressive, it's going to do enough, create enough pressure that the enemy will not be in a position to jump you. So you're changing how aggressive and passive you are with these abilities depending on what can directly punish you if you don't get value or things go wrong. It's like the risk to reward that you're kind of comparing. Now, one of the things that I gotta kind of point out, and this is super important, a lot of players complain about DPS Moira players, right? They complain about DPS Moira players all day, every day. I'm sure you've complained about it. I've complained about it. Everyone complained about it. But think about Moira's kit. What can she do? Where is her utility? She doesn't really have any. She could stay alive, and she can heal, and she can damage. So if Moira isn't damaging, and she's holding healing, that's nothing. It's really nothing. It's completely overkill. It's absolutely worthless. So a Moira that doesn't do any damage, doesn't cut off or force out aggressive DPS from your backline or punish DPS that think they can get away on off angles, this is really what Moira can do, and this is like all she can do. So you got to understand that every single character has that baseline, that healing baseline, but outside of that, you need to be thinking about the damage and utility that they provide, and that's something that you should still intermingle. Now, of course, DPS Moiras get the rap that they get because they don't heal when they should be healing, of course. But to say that they should never damage or they shouldn't have high kills or high damage, that's just not understanding that a Moira has to do that because that's their only other bit of utility outside of healing. Now, a big one that I learned on my climb, and I did play a lot of Ana, but I had the most success with Zen, and it's just to stop dying. Like, support players need to understand that their life is incredibly valuable. And this is actually just true for every role. Of course, your life is valuable. But really, if you are dying consistently, something needs to change. You should have as little deaths as possible. Hopefully, you have tied for or the least amount of deaths in the lobby. Now, what this takes, and this goes double for supports that don't have mobility, is that every stage of the fight, you need to be repositioning. If your teammates are in one position at the start and they push up, you need to move relative to them. If the cart moves up, you need to move relative to that. If the enemy pushes forward, you need to back up relative to that. Every single bit of movement from enemies and your team on the battlefield deserve you to move as well. If you're standing in the same spot for like longer than 20 seconds or maybe even 10 seconds, sometimes even 5 freaking seconds, you're standing there way too long because the fight is changing. How close the enemies are to you is changing. That Genji might have started freaking 30 feet away, but now he's 20, now he's 15, and you're not adjusting. Every single second you need to be adjusting. And one of the things that you need to understand is that your life matters more than just about anything. If the objective is about to be capped, if the payload's about to make a connection with the objective, you should not be pushing it anymore. It's not your job. Why should you not be pushing it? Because when the team fight happens, when the inevitable ultimate and utility dump happens, it's all going to happen around the point. And if you're sitting there as a Zen or an Ana, you're probably going to die. But if you back way up, play your range, play your angles, don't allow yourself to be in the fight and force enemies, if they literally want to come to you and kill you and punish you, they have to leave these objectives. They have to go chase you down. That's the only way that they're going to be able to kill you. And you're dying a lot because you're not positionally changing at every single stage of the fight. And for you players that play mobility-based supports, whether it's Lucio, even if it's Moira, Baptiste, Mercy, whatever the case may be, a lot of the time, it's putting yourself in a risky position pre-fight, so like you're already being forced to use these movement abilities beforehand. So like a Moira that plays too aggressively at the start of the fight hasn't started yet, and then has to fade away, and then a Diva Bomb comes in and they die, or a Blade comes in and they die because they didn't really need to use these abilities early before the fight starts, and they don't have them when the fight actually does. Now, the fifth thing, and this one is really, really important for supports to get right, it has to do with your ultimates. And it's especially because supports have some of the highest or strongest ultimates in the game. And These are the 3 ways in which ultimates should typically be used. The first one is to combo your ultimates. It's super strong, and there's almost always someone you can combo it with, whether you're nano blading or trying to nano death blossom. Maybe you're rushing your hoggle, whatever the case may be, try to combo these ultimates or stack them with other ultimates to get amplified value. And the second thing that you should be using your ultimates for is response, right? You're trying to beat in a response to something. You're saving it and you're tracking that ultimate that you're trying to counter. This is super important because when you're playing for response, you have to play passively that reflects the idea that you can't be forced to use it. So a great example of this is if you're like a Zen or a Lucio and you're trying to counter a freaking blade or maybe even a nano blade or something like that, right? If you are trying to counter it, you know they have it, they know you have it, they are going to be trying to bait it out of you. They're going to be trying to pressure you, they're going to be trying to kill you, they're going to be trying to force you to use it early so that they can win the fight. So how should you play if that's the truth? You should not be going in aggressively. You should not be trying to get kills. You should not be wall riding like a psychopath. But I've seen it way too many times in every VOD review I watch, and I'm sure you've probably been victim of this as well. You play really aggressive. You play out of position. You don't play passive enough, and they bait out the ultimate. And then right after it's done, you get bladed. And your team's like, why did we use ultimate if we knew they had blade? And you were like, well, they forced it. I was going to die. What do you want me to do? Well, you really should not have been playing that aggressively. In fact, you should have been playing far more passive because the idea is you have to use it in response. That's the whole game plan. Don't let the opponent disrupt your game plan and assume that they also know that you have that defensive ultimate and they're thinking about it. Now, the last way to use ultimates, and this one is the hardest to master, but potentially the most powerful, and it's the tempo. The idea behind this is that you're using your ultimate to keep the momentum going. Whether you're trying to keep snowballing enemies, you're trying to never let them have a real fight, and typically a tempo ultimate works the best when you see opponents are not regrouping properly. If 2 or 3 opponents start to group up and push forward, acting like there's someone when you know that there's still 2 of their teammates back in spawn, that's a perfect idea to tempo an ultimate. Keep rushing in, keep nanoing in, allow your team to keep staggering the opponents. Now, you have to make sure that your teammates are on the relative same page, and it doesn't really have to be all that coordinated. If you can communicate with them, great. If not, just if your teammates are pushed up and aggressive enough, you're like, okay, my team are just going to want to fight this, especially if I nano my Rein. He's going to run in because that's what Reins do. If I rush my team, they're going to run in because that's what rush enables them to do. So oftentimes, tempo ultimates typically come directly from the position of opponents, not necessarily your teammates. But it is really important that you look out for these signs. You see opportunities to tempo an ultimate so that you don't just sit there, allow the opponents to full respawn, and then instead of being able to just snowball and cap the point for free, they can reinvest or counter invest like 2, 3, 4 ultimates, and then you might even lose the fight, and no one likes that. So yeah, these are my big things that if you want to climb and even carry on support, you need to master them and take them to heart. But I'm going to be doing a full VOD breakdown on this channel so that you can learn exactly what you should be incorporating in your games to master support. But definitely check out my stream if you want to learn more about matchups and how to dominate or climb on any character in any role. Check it out in the description right now down below.